Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Buckle up. What you're about to hear is not a love story. It's not even a tragedy. It's a quiet storm that finally screamed at the worst possible moment. Let's get into it. The champagne was still fizzing when she looked across the room and spotted me. She blinked, once, slowly, like she couldn't quite believe I was there. Her hand, which had just been resting lightly on her boss's forearm, slipped off. Not quickly, not with guilt, just deliberately. Like she was trying to erase a moment without acknowledging it ever happened, but I had already seen everything. And that moment, the exact moment her lips curled into a surprised smile, and she began walking toward me in that black backless dress, is where everything inside me came undone. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. Not out of anger, not even out of hurt, just a sort of exhausted clarity I hadn't felt in years. "Not after what you did," I said, and the smile she wore, the one that had disarmed so many rooms before, dissolved. Let me back up. This wasn't supposed to be my night. I wasn't even supposed to be there. According to her, this was a professional function, strictly senior management. "The kind of people who talk about golf and stocks," she'd said. "You'd hate it." I told her to have a good time. I always did. I was the supportive husband, the nice guy, the one who checked her tire pressure before long drives, the one who remembered her coworker's dog's name when she forgot, the one who booked her dentist appointments without being asked. But a few weeks ago, I found a dry cleaning slip for a red cocktail dress I'd never seen her wear. Then came the charges for rideshare trips that ended 5 blocks from our house, and a lost earring in her gym bag that wasn't hers, because I had given her that pair 2 years ago, and she'd told me she lost them on a trip to Miami. The signs weren't loud. They were quiet, dull, repetitive, like a faucet that won't stop dripping no matter how tightly you twist the handle. So I twisted back. I messaged her coworker from my old work email and asked if guests were allowed at the annual holiday party. He replied, "Yeah, totally. Everyone brings their partners." Huh. That's when I ironed my shirt and called my old friend Mason, who works security at the venue. He owed me a favor. I didn't explain why. He didn't ask. I showed up 40 minutes after the party started, long enough for people to get loose, long enough for her to forget that I might be watching. And I watched. Her laughter was just a little too musical, her posture a little too open. She held her wine glass the way she used to hold her phone when texting someone she liked. Tilted, guarded, yet flirtatiously casual. Then her boss, that smug, over-moisturized man with the voice of a podcast ad, clinked his glass and made a toast. He said something about loyalty and leadership, and panned the room with a predator's grin. Tessa was standing next to him, her arm brushing his. She toasted back, and that's when I stepped forward. I didn't yell, I didn't grab a mic. I just stood in the place where a husband's presence makes everything suddenly harder to explain, and when she saw me, her face said it all. "You weren't supposed to come, but I did. And I wasn't leaving until the silence did what my words never could. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw my glass or make a scene. I simply turned around after saying it, not after what you did, and walked away. The kind of walk that doesn't expect to be followed, the kind of walk that hurts more than shouting ever could. I heard heels behind me, unsure and faltering, but they never got close. She didn't run after me, not right away. I stepped into the elevator, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my ears. My palms were sweating, not from confrontation, but from holding it all in for too long. The door closed slowly, and I caught one last glimpse of her face before it vanished. She looked stunned, embarrassed, but not regretful. That was the part that stung most, the absence of panic. Outside, the city felt colder than it was. I stood on the edge of the sidewalk, letting traffic blur past me, while I tried to figure out what I'd just done. It wasn't part of any grand plan. I hadn't fantasized about a confrontation or practiced a speech. I just reacted, and maybe for once it had been honest. A few minutes passed, still no sign of her. I thought she'd at least text, but there was nothing, just my phone glowing in the dark like a stubborn ghost. Then I remembered her purse, the one she'd bought behind my back last month. Said it was a work necessity. I'd seen the price tag, a necessity that cost more than our weekend trips. That purse had been sitting on the table near the bar inside, and next to it, her phone, unattended, unlocked. I went back in. No one stopped me. The party was loud again, people pretending like nothing had just happened. I moved like a shadow, passed behind laughing executives, and found her clutch exactly where I thought it'd be. I hesitated. My conscience said don't, my gut said do. So I looked, and I wish I hadn't. There were messages. Dozens. Not from Martin. That would have almost been a relief at this point. No, these were from someone saved under a fake name, Erica-HR. Except Erica didn't talk about quarterly reports. She talked about weekend getaways, the color of Tessa's bedsheets, and how good she looked in that red dress that I thought she hadn't worn yet. Photos, too, some taken in our house, in our bed. I didn't breathe. My thumb hovered, my heart screaming to throw the phone, smash it, do something. But I didn't. I locked the screen and set it right back where I found it, neat, untouched, as if I hadn't just watched the quiet foundation of my life disintegrate into pixels. I walked back out. Still no messages, no apologies, no, wait, let me explain. But I didn't need her to explain anymore. The truth was already loud enough. And as I started walking toward the subway, jacket open, shirt wrinkled, tie half undone, I realized something terrifying. She had been gone long before I ever left that room. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not because I was scared of seeing her, but because I didn't trust myself not to crumble the moment I stepped through that door. I walked for hours instead, aimlessly, like a man trying to outpace a memory. Every streetlight felt like an interrogation. Every couple holding hands was a punch to the ribs. I ended up at an all-night diner, the kind with sticky tables, flickering signs, and bottomless coffee that tastes like burnt paper. It was perfect. I slid into a booth in the corner, pulled my coat tighter, and tried to breathe like a person who still had control over his life. Around 2:14 a.m., the message finally came. Just 5 words. Where did you go? I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to answer, but because of how insultingly simple it was. Like she had misplaced her car keys or forgotten where she parked. There was no, I'm sorry, no, can we talk? No acknowledgement of what she knew I saw. I typed, you left long before I did, then deleted it. Typed again, I was just catching up. Deleted that too. Eventually, I just shut the phone off. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't be used against me later. That's the thing about people like Tessa. They're brilliant at emotional rerouting. You come in with pain and somehow leave apologizing for bleeding on their carpet. By 4 a.m., I was cold, exhausted, and barely functioning, but I still couldn't make myself go home. I didn't want to see our hallway, or the half-used lotion bottle she always left open, or the framed photo from our trip to Oregon where she pretended I was enough. I didn't want to see my toothbrush beside hers. I didn't want to feel like a guest in my own life. So I went to Mason's place, the same friend who got me into the party. He opened the door half asleep, saw my face, and didn't ask a single question. Just pointed to the couch and tossed me a blanket. We've been friends for 20 years. He knew better than to press. I barely slept. My dreams were a blur of half-finished conversations, laughter that wasn't meant for me, and doorways I couldn't walk through. When I finally did wake up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, pressing silence that waits for you to fill it with denial or decisions. Tessa had sent 3 more texts. Are you okay? You can't just disappear like that. Let's be adults and talk. Adults. That one made me laugh out loud in Mason's living room. Adults don't lie for months. Adults don't invite someone else into the life they promised to build with you and expect you to keep watering the garden while they're planting weeds. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I went back to our apartment, not to talk, not to yell, just to look, clearly for the first time. And what I saw confirmed everything I'd been too tired to admit. Our home wasn't ours anymore. Her shoes were scattered like she lived alone. A second wine glass in the sink, not mine. A jacket on the back of the chair that didn't belong to either of us. And on the kitchen counter, sitting in plain view like it wasn't a bomb, was a printed itinerary. Weekend getaway, 2 names, 1 room, 1 bed. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that itinerary. My brain refused to accept it at first. Like, if I blinked enough times, the names would rearrange themselves and mine would magically appear. But no, it was printed in bold black ink. Tessa Callan and Curtis Fielding. Check-in, Saturday, 3 p.m., 2 nights. A boutique hotel known for romantic privacy and in-room fireplaces. I remembered once telling Tessa we should go there. She'd scoffed, said it was overpriced and cheesy. I guess it wasn't cheesy with him. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't need to. I knew what it meant. My mind spiraled in 2 directions at once. One part reliving every conversation I'd misread, and the other trying to imagine what they'd done in that room, on that bed, with my wife calling out a name that wasn't mine. There was this strange moment of stillness, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. I looked around, suddenly seeing everything through new eyes. The frame wedding photo by the bookshelf, the one she insisted we keep displayed even after we'd stopped touching each other. The plant I watered every week because she always forgot, even though she insisted on buying it. Her sweater on the back of the couch, the one I used to wrap around her when she got cold. Every object felt like a betrayal by association. My phone buzzed again, another text from her. "I'm heading home in 15. We need to talk." She still didn't know I'd seen it. The itinerary, the jacket, the sink with 2 wine glasses. I could feel her lining up her excuses already, sharpening them like knives. She would probably say it was a work trip, maybe claim they accidentally got 1 room. She'd cry, not because she was sorry, but because she was caught. I had 15 minutes. I didn't waste them. I walked into our bedroom and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. It was organized the way she liked. Her journals, essential oils, a sleep mask she never used. And tucked beneath it all was the box I gave her on our 5th anniversary. A small carved wooden keepsake box with a metal clasp. She kept little notes in there, movie stubs, pressed flowers, the keychain from our first road trip. And there it was, a folded piece of paper that didn't belong. A love note, not from me. I didn't read it all. I couldn't. Just the opening line made my chest tighten like a vice. "I wish I could wake up next to you every day and not pretend." That's all I needed to know. The rest wasn't for me. It never had been. It was a piece of the life she built in the cracks of ours. I closed the drawer quietly. My pulse was calm now. Not because I was okay, but because there was nothing left to defend, no story to save. I walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and waited. I didn't plan what I'd say. I didn't have a speech. I just knew one thing with certainty. Whatever mask she wore when she walked through that door, I wouldn't be the one helping her hold it up anymore. And when the lock finally turned and the door creaked open, I looked up. She was smiling, shopping bags in hand, lip gloss fresh, breath ready to spin the first line of the story she thought I hadn't already read. She walked in like it was any other Saturday, set the bags on the table, kicked off her heels, and smiled that empty smile she'd been perfecting for months. "Hey, you're home," she said, like I was the surprise. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, elbows on my knees, staring at the space just past her shoulder. I didn't even know what I was waiting for. An apology? A confession? A slip-up? But she gave me none of it. Instead, she bent down to sort through her bags like she hadn't just booked a romantic weekend with her boss behind my back. She pulled out a new candle. "Smell this," she said, waving it toward me like peace in a jar. "It's lavender and vetiver. Calming, right?" I looked at her hand, holding out the candle like some kind of offering. She wanted this to be normal. She wanted me to sit there, nod, and play my part. I didn't move. "I found the itinerary," I said flatly. Her face barely flickered. I watched her blink twice, slowly, calculating. "What itinerary?" It was a performance, a bad one. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened slightly around the candle jar. She was rehearsing excuses in real time, eyes darting as if searching for which version of the truth would make me doubt myself first. "You mean the hotel thing?" she added quickly. "It's a group booking. You misunderstood." I stood up, not abruptly, just enough to interrupt her script. "Don't," I said. "You're better at this when you're not insulting both of our intelligence." Silence stretched between us like a crack in glass. She set the candle down, finally realizing the script wouldn't save her this time. Then came the sigh. The long, theatrical one. The one she used when she wanted to look like the victim. "You've been distant," she said, her voice softer now, lower, like she was trying to pull me back into orbit. "You haven't looked at me the same in months." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the most predictable card in her deck. Blame shift. Turn the betrayal into mutual neglect. Rewrite the ending so we both failed equally. I haven't looked at you the same, I repeated, because the woman I married wouldn't lie to my face while someone else slept in our life. She flinched just slightly. That was the first crack. The first moment she realized this wasn't going to be fixed with a hug or a whispered promise that she didn't mean it. I was finally standing at the edge of the line she'd crossed weeks ago. You had choices, I continued. You could have talked to me, told me you weren't happy, asked for space, asked for anything but this. She dropped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. And maybe that's when the guilt kicked in. Or maybe she just realized she'd finally lost control of the narrative. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she mumbled. It just happened. No, I said, kneeling down so we were eye to eye. You didn't just trip and fall into a hotel suite. You didn't just accidentally erase me from your life. You made decisions, over and over again. You watered something with someone else while letting us dry out. She didn't cry. That would have made this easier. Tears I could have handled. But she just looked tired, worn out, not sorry, just inconvenienced. And that's when I knew. She sat slouched on the couch like all the weight she'd carried was suddenly real. For months she'd floated above this. Light-footed lies, careful phrases, the slippery art of deflection. But now, finally, she was grounded, and so was I. The room was quiet, save for the dull hum of the refrigerator and the steady thump of my own heartbeat in my ears. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute, and somehow that silence felt louder than every argument we'd ever had. You want me to beg? She finally asked, voice flat, eyes hollow. I shook my head slowly. I don't want anything from you. Not anymore. She looked at me, like she didn't recognize who I was. Maybe she didn't. Maybe that was the first time I'd ever said something she couldn't manipulate. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, as if she were mentally packing, already calculating how to exit this disaster cleanly. But that was the thing. This couldn't be cleaned. It had soaked into every corner of who we were. I turned and walked into the kitchen, needing distance. I grabbed a glass of water just to hold something. My hands were trembling, not from rage, but from a sick kind of clarity. I'd built my life around someone who had outgrown me and never told me, someone who had traded honesty for convenience, and who expected me to keep smiling through it. She followed, leaned against the doorway like a scene out of a drama, arms crossed, lips tight. Curtis doesn't mean anything, she said carefully, like the words were blades she had to handle with gloves. I looked at her, really looked at her. You packed lingerie for someone who doesn't mean anything? I asked. You let him sleep in our bed last week, Tessa. I found the cufflink under my pillow, the silk one with his initials. Don't insult both of us by pretending this was an accident. That stopped her. Her jaw clenched, and for a second, she looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She couldn't. And maybe that was the last nail in the coffin. I think part of me was still hoping she'd fall apart, that the guilt would swallow her whole, that there was some fragment of the woman I married left in there, beating against her ribcage, begging to come out. But all I saw was someone trying to minimize the damage. We weren't working, she said, the words slow and practiced. You know that. We were surviving, I corrected. I was holding the pieces together while you were sneaking around behind my back, acting like you were the only one tired. I gave you everything, Tessa. Space, support, second chances. Hell, I let you make me feel guilty for your distance. Her arms dropped, and for a second, she just stood there, unguarded. But even now, even standing in the ruins of what we built, she couldn't fully admit it. I didn't plan to fall for him, she whispered. And I didn't plan to be this destroyed by you, I replied. We stared at each other like strangers, two people who once promised forever, now barely able to stand in the same room. She looked at the floor, I looked at the door. Then I said the one thing she clearly hadn't expected. I'm not going to fight you, I said. You can have him. You already chose him anyway. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. Ephraim. No, I interrupted. You don't get to fall apart now. You don't get to act shocked when the person you broke finally stops bleeding for you. She didn't reply. I walked past her, down the hall, into the bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not one more night, not one more hour pretending like this could be fixed with promises that already expired. I zipped the bag halfway and sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped beneath me, like it was sighing after carrying so much false peace for so long. Everything felt smaller now. The room, the air, even time itself. This was the same bedroom where she used to fall asleep curled up against me. The same place where I once believed her breathing next to mine meant safety. I was surrounded by ghost versions of us, haunting every corner of the space we used to call home, and all of them were watching me leave. Behind me, she was still frozen in the doorway. She hadn't moved, hadn't cried, hadn't tried to stop me. Maybe she thought this was just another dramatic moment, that I'd storm out, cool off, and return tomorrow like I always did. That was the role I'd always played, the one who forgave, who stayed, who swallowed betrayal in favor of peace. But this time, there would be no returning. "I'm not leaving to punish you," I finally said, not looking at her. "I'm leaving because I finally understand you're not afraid of losing me. You're afraid of being seen for who you really are." Her silence stung more than if she'd screamed. It confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't sorry. She was simply inconvenienced. Not by the cheating, but by the fact that I had stopped making it easy for her. "I thought you'd fight for this," she said quietly, her voice shaking with manufactured vulnerability. "I did," I replied. "You just weren't watching." I stood up, looked around the room one last time, and grabbed the photo from the nightstand, our wedding day. We were standing on a dock, sun behind us, her eyes wide with the kind of joy that makes you believe in things like forever. I stared at it for a second, then turned it face down and left it there. That version of her no longer existed. That version of us never really did. As I stepped into the hallway, she finally moved. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But wherever it is, it'll be a place where I'm not just the placeholder between your lies." She opened her mouth to speak but stopped. Maybe because the words weren't ready, or maybe because there was nothing left to say. For a second, I almost hoped she'd follow me, that she'd break, cry, say something real. But all she did was stand there in that hallway we'd painted together, looking at me like she wasn't sure whether to call this an ending or a threat. I left without slamming the door, just a quiet click behind me. That felt more final than any loud goodbye ever could. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I took a deep breath, longer than I had in weeks. It didn't feel good, not yet. It just felt real. It's strange how quiet the world feels after you walk away from someone who used to be your everything. I thought I'd feel shattered, hollow, maybe even angry. But what surprised me most was the calm. Not the fake kind, the kind I'd been faking for years just to keep our lives from collapsing, but something real, something earned. I moved into a tiny studio apartment above a bookstore owned by a retired couple named Harold and Lee. The ceiling leaks when it rains, and the heater makes noises like it's haunted, but it's mine. The first morning I woke up there, I made coffee in silence, not because something was wrong, but because nothing was. No lies, no pretending, just peace. It took time, more than I expected. There were nights I missed her, not the woman she became, but the version I thought she was. I grieved the life we never really had. But I also started remembering who I was before I became a background character in my own story. I picked up old hobbies. I started writing again. I even joined a weekend hiking group where no one knew anything about me except my first name. Last week, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Marielle, an old friend from college. She asked how I'd been, and I hesitated for a second before answering. And then, with zero doubt in my chest, I said, "Better." She smiled and said, "I can tell. I'm not telling you this story for pity. I'm not a hero. I ignored signs I shouldn't have. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I bent myself backward for someone who wouldn't lift a finger for me, but I got up. I walked away. And that matters. Sometimes closure doesn't come with a dramatic ending. It comes quietly, in the way your hands stop shaking, or how your breathing finally slows down at night. It comes when you sit alone and don't feel lonely. To anyone watching who's stuck in something that's slowly killing your spirit, I promise, peace isn't a fantasy. It's out there, and you deserve to find it. I found mine the moment I stopped asking her to hold my hand and started holding my own. Thanks for staying with me through this story.